Richard stepped through the grand doors of the old hotel, his heart skipping a beat. The lobby was breathtaking, with its high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and the faint scent of polished wood mingling with something older. Something that whispered history. He couldn't help but feel a tingle of excitement mixed with nervousness. This was his first real job, and everything about the place screamed elegance and a hint of mystery. Staff bustled past him, polite smiles masking whispered rumors he could almost hear if he tried. Even as he followed the manager down the marble corridors, Richard felt like he was walking into a story he hadn't yet written. As Richard was shown to his cleaning assignments, the manager casually mentioned some rooms were trickier than others, with a dismissive laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. One name kept coming up in hushed tones: Room 36. The other staff exchanged quick, almost guilty glances whenever it was mentioned, but the manager waved it off as nonsense. Still, Richard's curiosity was piqued. He imagined the room hidden down a dimly lit corridor, its door perhaps slightly warped from age, promising secrets behind its heavy frame. The smell of polished floors mixed with faint traces of something metallic and old, as if the walls themselves remembered the past. Every step he took made him more aware that this hotel wasn't just a workplace. It was a living, breathing entity. That evening, armed with his cleaning supplies, Richard finally approached Room 36. The air seemed to thicken as he stepped closer, a chill creeping up his spine despite the warm glow of the hallway lights. He noticed small, unsettling details: a faint, sweetish odor that didn't belong, a picture frame slightly askew, and the unmistakable cold spot near the door. Hesitating for only a moment, he opened the room and froze. Something was off. Profoundly wrong. Shadows clung to the corners, and a fleeting movement made his stomach twist. Then he saw it, a scene that made his pulse slam, an unmistakable act of violence, raw and immediate. Yet by the time he rushed to report it, the room was empty, spotless, and no one believed a word he said. Richard couldn't shake the image of that night, the way Room 36 had swallowed the truth and spat out denial. Days passed, and he found himself digging into the hotel's past, sneaking glances at old guest logs and newspaper clippings tucked away in dusty corners. Each story he uncovered added another layer to the unease gnawing at him. Couples who stayed in that room seemed to vanish into a haze of misfortune. Arguments, disappearances, or tragedies that no one wanted to talk about. Richard's mind buzzed with questions. Why Room 36? Was it just coincidence? Or something far darker lurking behind the faded wallpaper and ornate furniture? Every whisper he'd overheard suddenly felt like a warning. As Richard dug deeper, strange things began happening to him. Whispers curled around the hallways at night, shadows darted just beyond the corner of his vision, and objects sometimes shifted when he wasn't looking. The air in the hotel seemed charged, as if the building itself were alive and watching him closely. He started keeping a secret journal, jotting down every odd occurrence, every guest complaint that hinted at something sinister. Slowly, patterns began to emerge, details connecting the room's influence to the behaviors of those who stayed there. The more he documented, the heavier the weight on his chest grew, but he couldn't stop. The room had him hooked, like a puzzle that demanded to be solved. Night after night, Richard felt the pull of Room 36 growing stronger, an almost magnetic force he couldn't resist. Fear twisted in his gut, but curiosity burned brighter, urging him to uncover what no one dared to speak aloud. He pored over old reports and diaries from longtime staff, piecing together a story that was more than coincidence. It was a curse, a repeating pattern of heartbreak and misfortune. Every new revelation made the hotel feel less like a workplace, and more like a labyrinth of secrets waiting to be unraveled. Richard knew he was stepping into danger, but he also understood something fundamental. If he didn't find out the truth, no one else would. The next steps were clear, even if they terrified him. Determined to uncover the secrets of Room 36, Richard began sneaking into the hotel archives late at night. Dust hung thick in the air, and the faint scent of mildew mixed with aged paper made him cough, but he couldn't stop. He rifled through old guest registers, yellowed letters, and staff journals, searching for any clue about the room's sinister past. Each document revealed glimpses of tragedies, arguments escalating to violence, disappearances that were quietly hushed, and warnings carefully ignored. Even longtime staff, when questioned, gave guarded, uneasy answers, their eyes darting nervously as if the room itself might overhear. The more he discovered, the more he realized that room 36 was far from ordinary. It carried a darkness that refused to be ignored. One evening, Richard managed to corner a retired housekeeper, a woman whose hands trembled slightly as she spoke. She told him of a violent incident decades ago, an owner obsessed with control, a forbidden ritual, and a couple whose fate had cursed the room forever. Her voice quavered, and she clutched a faded photograph like a lifeline, as if sharing the secret could somehow undo the horror. Just as he was absorbing the story, the hotel manager appeared, sharp and cold, warning Richard to leave the past alone. The manager's eyes carried an unspoken threat, a clear message. Some truths were meant to stay buried. Richard's resolve hardened. He had to know everything, even if it meant defying authority and risking more than just his job. That night, Richard found himself back at room 36, compelled by a mix of fear and curiosity he couldn't resist. The door creaked open, and the cold, heavy air seemed to reach out, brushing against his skin. Shadows twisted unnaturally in the corners, and faint whispers slithered through the silence, almost coaxing him closer. As he stepped further inside, a sudden movement, too fast, too precise, made him stumble back, heart hammering. Objects shifted violently around him, and for a moment, the room seemed alive, feeding off his fear. He barely managed to escape, slamming the door behind him, gasping and drenched in sweat. But the thrill of revelation lingered. The danger was real, and yet he knew he couldn't turn back now. Richard knew there was only one way to uncover the truth. He had to stay in room 36 overnight. The thought made his stomach twist, but curiosity and determination overpowered the fear gnawing at him. As he entered the room that evening, the temperature dropped instantly, icy tendrils curling around his wrists and neck. Shadows clung to the corners like silent spectators, and faint, almost imperceptible whispers brushed past his ears. Every detail felt amplified: the worn carpet underfoot, the faint metallic scent in the air, the dim flicker of the lamp casting eerie shapes on the walls. He settled into a chair, trying to steady his racing mind, knowing that tonight he would witness the room's dark secrets firsthand. Hours passed, and the room seemed to come alive around Richard. Shadows stretched and twisted in impossible ways. Faint voices murmured just beyond comprehension, and fleeting figures appeared, vanishing before he could fully focus. Each event felt like the room was testing him, probing the edges of his courage. Then, amid the chaos, he noticed something, a small, peculiar object tucked beneath the bed, untouched by time yet radiating a strange energy. His fingers hovered above it, heart thundering, as he realized this object might be the key to understanding the curse. A shiver ran down his spine. The room's horrors were not random. They were deliberate, targeted, and somehow connected to every couple who had stayed here before. Richard's pulse raced as he pieced it together. The curse wasn't random. The room seemed to prey on couples in a calculated way, magnifying tensions, fears, and hidden resentments until disaster struck. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper, felt like the room reminding him of its power. He clutched the strange object, its cold weight grounding him, yet amplifying the sense of urgency. Suddenly, a shadow lunged from the corner, nearly knocking him to the floor, and the whispers crescendoed into a deafening cacophony. Heart pounding and breath shallow, Richard realized that leaving the room tonight might not be a certainty. Whatever haunted room 36 wasn't done with him, and the danger was far closer than he'd imagined. Richard knew there was no turning back. He had to confront the darkness that had haunted room 36 for decades. Every instinct screamed to flee, but he steadied himself, gripping the cold, enigmatic object that had become his only anchor. The room seemed to pulse around him, walls breathing with a life of their own, shadows writhing as if aware of his every move. Voices of past victims whispered fragments of warning and sorrow, tugging at the edges of his resolve. In that tense, fragile moment, Richard realized that understanding the curse meant facing it head-on, even if it left scars, visible or hidden. The line between bravery and recklessness blurred as he prepared to face whatever force had ensnared the room for so long. The room erupted around Richard as he moved closer to the object at the heart of the curse. Shadows coiled like living smoke, and faint apparitions of past couples flickered in and out, their eyes filled with fear and sorrow. He could feel the weight of their stories pressing against him, each tragedy echoing in the cold air. Summoning every ounce of courage, Richard confronted the force, speaking aloud the truths he had uncovered, the violent history, the forgotten promises, and the injustices left unresolved. The room seemed to resist, lashing out with sudden gusts of cold and whispering threats, but the object pulsed in his hand, guiding him. In that charged, tense moment, he realized he had a choice: break the cycle or risk becoming another shadow in its story. The tension slowly ebbed as Richard's determination met the room's darkness head-on. A final shuddering pulse of energy rippled through the walls, and for a heartbeat, everything went still. The shadows receded, leaving a heavy silence that felt both triumphant and fragile. Richard slumped into a chair, heart still racing, knowing he had survived. But the experience had etched itself deep into his mind and soul. He understood now the weight of human darkness, how easily fear and obsession could twist lives, and how courage sometimes meant standing alone against it. Yet, even as he stepped away from room 36, a faint chill lingered, a whisper of unfinished business, hinting that the room's legacy might not be fully done with the world.